You're all familiar probably with how Zoom works, and if you're not, I'll just give you the quick rundown. You unmute yourself. For me, I can use Control or Alt A, but for you, there's a button on the bottom left, or you can use Alt A to unmute if you have a question. And I do want to invite you to jump in if you do have a question. I've got plenty of things to say, but it's less formal than some other times that I give information out. And so I want you to feel free to jump in and have this be a dialogue. I see that I'm a little bit in darkness. That's a little better. Oh, there's the light. Wow, it makes a big difference. Okay. So, and feel free to put stuff in the chat. And if I don't see it right away, Heather will jump in there and moderate and speak up for you. Thank you so much, Heather. This is my friend Heather O'Day, musician and speaker and good friend. And we met through the Centers for Spiritual Living. And so I'm so grateful to have you here helping me out today, Heather. Songwriter with a beautiful voice. And you're on mute, actually, Heather, probably locally.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's it.
Hey, hi everybody. Thank you, Sky, for inviting me tonight. I love Sky dearly. He's a very good friend, and I know him both as a musician and as a physicist and somebody who's delving into this science of synchronicity that we all love and are so interested in. So thank you for including me in these activities.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to have you all here. So we're here to talk tonight about the new book that I came out with this past month, that I wrote really starting around a month before the lockdown happened in the pandemic of COVID-19. And so it was quite an experience writing this book in a lot of quiet and solitude, but also a lot of emotional stuff going on in the world and around. And you'll feel some of that in the book, some of the emotions that were stirred up in me from that. It was nice in that way to have access to a lot of deep work that was going on around in myself too. So Leap to Wholeness, how the world is programmed to help us grow, heal, and adapt. And tonight we're just going to touch on a few of the main themes to give you a sense of what the book is about, and certainly answer any questions you have off the top of your head. And then I do have some following events coming up that go more in depth that I'll tell you about at the end. But I want to first give thanks to my family, Dana and Ellie. And Brooke Zimmerman is on the call here. She knows who I'm talking about. Amy, you know who I'm talking about. Dana is my wife. Ellie, I couldn't do it without them. They're just, they make it all worthwhile for me. And North Atlantic Books, Allison, Janelle, Michelle, Bevan, Joe, Jeff, those folks at North Atlantic. Jeff Thompson, the gentleman who wrote the foreword of the book. I just really appreciate his work in the world, teaching and learning and growing. I met him through a mutual friend, and when I heard him talk about the experience of spiritual awakening as this deep realization of the people he'd injured and hurt over his lifetime, and how when he awakened more, every time he had sort of an insight, it was like, oh, I need to go apologize to this person. And it was this really deep sense of what it means to awaken that I think is lost in our popular culture. So as soon as I saw him talking in that way, I really felt akin to him, the depth of transformation. And grief is a big part of transformation that I talk about in the book. So I'm really grateful to Jeff Thompson for helping me out with the foreword. And Celeste Fields, who helps me in my business work. Alex Barnes, who created the graphics that you'll see in the book. And John Yates for cover design, and Matt Hoover, who edited the book. And I want to give dedication to Yonim Schweig, my nephew, who we lost this past year. And my family is grieving deeply the loss of this really gentle soul that I felt really akin to. Yonim brought a sense of joyousness and silliness and seriousness at the same time, a depth of understanding of life. My nephew, who died very young and has so much to give and gave so much to us while he was here, bringing people together from across religions and across disciplines. My friend Jonathan Glass, who I lost about 10 years ago, deeply miss him. And anyone struggling with feeling isolated this past year, this book is for you. It speaks to isolation and the way in which our filters keep us from connecting, or can keep us from connecting, and tools to get through that and find connection. So thank you everyone for coming. And what's next? Oh, I want to tell you what I'm reading right now. I read recently Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys, a powerful book. One of those books that was easy to read because it was so well written. Great story about two boys sent to a very backwards reform school, two Black boys who were treated, under Jim Crow, and the story of their life together at the reform school. And it's just an incredible book, well written and very powerful for understanding some of the issues going on in our country right now. And Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. This is just important work that I'm committed to, and all of us need to be, in my view, understanding the history of struggles in this country to have equity and anti-racism, in Ibram Kendi's words. And just anti-racist is a term that implies that, or indicates that there is no such thing as not being racist. Our actions are each either racist or anti-racist. Our choices are racist or anti-racist. Everything we do is just part of the foam of what is going on in this dialogue. And so we are all part of this puzzle, and no one is labeled as one or the other, but everything we do sort of moves us in one direction or the other. So it's an empowering message from that book. I want to support the community organizations that have helped me out in Point Reyes, where I grew up, my community. Thank you so much to the Dance Palace Community Center. And I invite you anytime during this talk, if you live in the area and would like to support community folks. Dance Palace has done great work over the 46 years that I've been alive and living out in that way. So you can go to dancepalace.org/donate-now anytime. And Point Reyes Books, if you want to buy your book through them, you can order it online or go directly to them. Thank you, Stephen Sparks, and all the folks over there. So let's get started with the idea of what we're going to do today. We'll be here until 8:30. We'll stop pretty much right on time. And welcome questions throughout. Just jump in if you have a question, or raise your hand and put it in the chat or whatever. Heather can moderate, so you can feel free to reach out to Heather or reach out to the whole group, and she'll help you get airtime. And we'll do a little warm-up, introductions, my background, just to give you a little sense of what I do and where I'm from. And then we'll talk about the book, and we'll talk about specifically filters in physics and filters in perception. Filters is this idea that I explore a lot in the book, the way that we take all the information we get in and we filter it, we limit it to what we can perceive, what we can understand. And I see this as a really important thing to understand about ourselves, that we're always doing this. We're always limited in our understanding to what we can perceive through our filters. And the filters that we have are our thoughts and our emotions, the way that we see the world. And I can tie that into physics and what we know from physics, the filters of optics. And so I'll introduce you to a little bit of that science, which is, I think, really beautiful and fascinating, and ties into the phenomenon of holograms, if any of you are familiar with that. And then we'll do an exercise with a little bit of time that we have here to identify one of your filters. And throughout, I will have questions, but also at the end, we'll leave some time for questions and comments. So I'm going to stretch my arms up, and I invite you to stretch your arms up as well. And ask yourself this question: what is one feeling you'd like to have less of in your life? And what is one feeling you'd like to have more of in your life? And put that in the chat if you want to. Roll your shoulders if you want. Raise your hands above your head again. Whatever you want to do, stretch out. What is one feeling you'd like to have less of in your life? What's one feeling you'd like to have more of? Disappointment and joy. Disappointment, less disappointment, more joy.
Brooke says feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Less sadness and more joy from Lorna.
Mm-hmm.
Less anxiety and more peace. Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, these feel so universal.
Less guilt. That's excellent.
Less guilt. Wow, and the way that was written on the screen is powerful. It's unusual. Thank you for sharing that.
Less anxiety, more peace,
So
more
these
love.
these things we're talking about are filters. Filters are not bad things. They're not things we want to get rid of necessarily, but we want to understand them. We want to be able to move through them, understand or be able to move from anxiety to peace. And the idea of wholeness, the reason I talk about wholeness as the central point of the book is that we are anxious and we are peaceful. We have those parts of ourselves. And so we're not trying to get rid of any part, but to be able to move throughout our different rooms of our house, to move from anxiety to peace. We're always going to be having things that cause us anxiety or sadness or overwhelm or disappointment. And being able to move, to find things to say to ourselves or understand why we feel that way, what's going on, what triggered that feeling, what triggered some fear in us, and how to move from that space, that room in your house, back to out of the door of that room into the hallway maybe, and then down to find a different room. And just like you wouldn't want to spend all your time in the closet, but sometimes you got to go to the closet. It lets this, moving between the rooms of your house is like you get sent to the closet for a minute because somebody says something that, triggers some fear or anxiety. And then you find your way, oh, I got to talk to myself with compassion and empathy, or remind myself that I'm safe, and move back into the hallway and then back to the kitchen or wherever it is that I want to be at the moment to get stuff done, to move my life forward. Fear and empathy. Thank you, Dennis. So feel free to put more in there if you have more that come up for you. So the book opens with this question: how do we get something from nothing? But that's not the question that I think is, the one to really land on. That's where we start from in our culture. The science of the Big Bang is something I learned, early in my physics career as the answer to this question: how do we get something from nothing? And what I want to explore is that fundamental question: are we even questioning that question? Do we even think about what the question we're answering is? If we go to answer, how do we get something from nothing? Are we even aware that or if we say, the world was created with a Big Bang, or, when I get up this morning, I've got a list of things to do. I'm going to do all these things on my list. And if I don't get through them, I'm going to try and find more time in the evening to do them, or I'm going to push them off till tomorrow, or I'm going to feel guilty about it. And the sense that what I'm really doing is trying to get something, trying to fill up my day, which if I don't do something, I might be nothing. So I think this question leads to a sense of lack. If I don't get the next iPhone, what am I worth? And it leads to this sense of consumption and needing more, needing to improve ourselves. So I start with a different question. How do we get something from everything? It's a really different question. And it's not that the first question is wrong, but here we have a different question that sets us up with a different underlying assumption. Because here we're basically saying everything exists, everything is there waiting to be selected between, or everything is available to me. And my job is to choose to somehow get to the things that I want. I do have to move, I have to do things. Like I can't get from this part of the garden to that part of the garden without walking there. But there is the possibility of walking there and doing some weeding and then choosing a different part to walk to and swing in the hammock. And so there's all these different places in our garden we can go to have different experiences. And thinking of all of these as existing is this idea of the multiverse that you might have heard of from physics. That instead of starting with nothing and creating something from it, you're starting with all these branches of possibility. And then your job is really to select what part of this is really reflecting me. Who do I want to become? And so I like this phrase, we're carving away from wholeness. Wholeness is this everything. It's everything that exists, everything that's possible. And it's sort of hard to define even. It's not like one specific thing. It's different things in different cases. How do we get something from everything? How do we carve away from wholeness? And a rainbow is an example of this process, because a rainbow is beautiful because of what is not there. If you think about what a rainbow is, it's white light that has been spread by the raindrops like a prism into the different colors. So the red is moved up here, the blue is separated down here, and the red part is the absence of the blue. It appears red because it's got less blue, and the blue part appears blue because it's got less red. So here in this picture, you have white light everywhere, except there's no blue where the red is, and there's no red where the blue is. And actually, let me say that a little bit differently. There's red and blue everywhere, right? Because red and blue are part of white. So there's wholeness everywhere, except where you see the rainbow. That's where you see just a part of the light. So the part emerges out of the wholeness, and a rainbow becomes beautiful because of what is not there. And I want you to just think about your life and how you're going to go about your day tomorrow. Do you approach it with a mindset of having to start from scratch? Having to bring energy to everything you do? Or do you approach it with a mindset of all these things that are going to unfold, and your job is maybe navigating that, selecting carefully where you want to go next, what feels right, where is flow for you? And then these experiences, synchronicities, will unfold based on what you decide to do. However you carve away from that wholeness is what will elicit the synchronicities that do come your way tomorrow. Think of it like a marble statue, a big block of marble that you're carving away from, and inside of there somewhere is the statue of David or whatever you're carving. So it already exists inside there, and you're trying to liberate it. So one of the things that was really fun about writing this book was wanting to get even more into science, because the inspiration for writing this book was that I was doing research that was really relevant. And I'm really excited to say that at the very last day of December 2020, I hit a lifelong milestone of publishing this research that I've been doing. So it's out there, and you can find it anytime at by searching for space-time paths as a whole. It's in the journal Quantum Reports. I don't recommend reading it unless you're a physicist, but it's very exciting to have done that. And that research is what you'll read in this book. So if you want to read about the research, you'll get it from the book. And one of the things I did was turn some of these physics concepts into meditations. So you can understand the way a physicist would look at the situation without having to look through the physicist's eyes with the math, but through their eyes of the creative sense of wonder and awe that a person can get when they think about science in a certain way. So I invite you to relax, get comfortable. If you'd like to close your eyes, you can. And this meditation is called "You Cannot Touch Without Being Touched." Imagine yourself standing in a meadow. Above you is the evening sky with the colors of the sunset. In front of you are some reeds at the edge of a lake. You walk forward to a gap in the reeds and step out onto the water. It supports you as you walk slowly past the reeds toward the middle of the lake. You watch your feet as you walk. Each time your foot touches the water, ripples spread outward from the point of contact. The ripples form concentric circles around each foot, forming a web of circles from all of your steps. You get to the middle of the lake and you stop walking. You glance up at the sunset and the darkening sky, with a few first stars shining in the deep blueness. You take a deep breath. You're curious about the ripples on the water. You direct your eyes downward at the water again, to find that all the ripples have died away. The surface of the lake is like a mirror. You can see 3 stars reflected in it. You bend down and ever so carefully extend your index finger toward the surface. The instant your finger makes contact with the water surface, ripples emanate outward from the spot that your finger touched. You pull your finger away, and another set of identical ripples is created. You gaze softly in wonder at this ever so familiar pattern of ripples. It is the pattern of raindrops on the sidewalk or craters on the moon. You extend your finger even more carefully to the water's surface. When you touch it, yet again, ripples race outward from your finger across the lake. Just by the slightest interaction with the lake, you have caused ripples. You marvel that the ripples are the water's response to you. There is no half-hearted interaction with the water's surface. It is all or nothing. And the ripples are the undeniable evidence that you are here on the lake. You raise your gaze and turn around to see the moon rising above the edge of the lake. Slowly and gracefully, you walk across the water back to the shore. You step onto the soft grass and the firm earth. You feel yourself interacting with the wondrous earth in 1,000 simultaneous ways and give thanks. So you cannot touch without being touched. Everything you do sends ripples outwards. And you are touched by others too. So I want to go from this space of visualizing physics to giving you some visuals of what wholeness looks like and what a filter is. Again, a filter is in our personal lives are the things that we think and the things that we feel which limit our perceptions, which limit what we can understand. If someone gives us a compliment, but we don't think we feel insecure about what they're complimenting us for, we might not be able to hear it. If someone says we look good, but we don't like the dress we're wearing because it feels too tight, or the pants we're wearing, then we might not be able to hear the compliment because we have a filter that's taking the input information and changing it. So our filters are like a mask or a barrier between us and the world. And so it's about seeing that in action and understanding what those filters are for us. So let me give you a sense of what I mean by wholeness. Wholeness in physics is a real concept. And this is part of what I'm putting forward in my research that isn't really well established or well researched already, which is very interesting to me. So think of this picture of the city like a map. Like the territory itself. This is the city. It's a photograph of a city. But if I want to take this image and decompose it into its pieces, well, one way you can decompose an image is obviously into its pixels. You could tell me where the blue pixels are, where the gray pixels are, and one by one you could take it apart. And that would be reductionism. That would be taking the whole thing and breaking it into pieces that are all separate and independent. But there's another way to decompose this picture into pieces, and that is into its patterns. And you can see that this picture has a lot of patterns to it. It's got a lot of horizontal lines, a lot of vertical lines. And so when we look at the picture through the eyes of patterning, we start to see new things. And the thing on the right is actually a map of the patterns of the picture on the left. It's amazing. This actually is something that I realized or learned in college many years ago and got me started thinking on these lines many years ago that has come to fruition now in the work that I'm telling you about today. So this map on the right is called the Fourier domain or the frequency domain. And it's essentially the spectrum of all the different patterns, spatial patterns that you see on the screen. So for instance, a pattern, like if you look at my shirt right here, it goes quickly from white to dark. And from here it's white, here it's dark. There's a sharp edge. So that sharp edge, that quick transition between white and dark is going to be a high frequency change. We call that a high spatial frequency. And that's going to be somewhere around the edges of this map. So the outlines of the buildings are like that. Probably too hot on the microphone. There we go. Move it away a little bit. The outlines of the buildings are sharp edges, and that information is contained around the edges of the Fourier domain or frequency domain. And I'll show you in a minute, we can actually remove that part of the spectrum and see the effects on the whole picture. It's quite phenomenal. But first, I want to show you how to build up this pattern from pieces. So here on the left is a very simple pattern. It is a set of wavy lines going at a slight downward angle. And it turns out that I can describe that with two dots in the frequency domain. These are these two dots, and it's sort of a downward angle. And I can keep adding frequencies like this, adding patterns, adding more patterns, and they get more complex. Now it sort of looks like an egg crate. Now it starts to look like a piece of cloth. And now you see the magic. Because if I add all the right patterns with these little dots that I was showing you a minute ago, I start to see an actual image forming. So somewhere buried in all this information is the image itself. The city is there with all of its very regular lines, very straight edges, is embedded within all of these wavy patterns that interfere with each other. So I've always been interested in interference once I learned about quantum mechanics, and so this is touching on some of that. But the takeaway is that if you want to build up this city, you can do it from waves, and every wave you add, it stretches across the whole screen. So if I wanted to remove like one building, I couldn't really do it. I'd have to change every part of the frequency domain. I'd have to change every frequency present. I see a question there. Feel free to jump in, Heather, if that's a question. Oh, great. So I'm a little bit of crackle. I'll just turn down a little bit, see if that's any better. Yeah, keep letting me know if my sound is good. So what I've done is I've built up this city, and if I want to make a change, then I have to do so all at once. Let me rewind that for a second. This next step is really cool. Having Zoom capability challenges. There we go. So I'm gonna apply a filter now. This is what I mean by a filter. I'm gonna erase some of the outside of the map. And when I erase those high frequencies, the picture blurs. I change all of the edges everywhere. So as a metaphor, think about when you change one thing in your life about you. Like I think about being more patient. I try to be more patient with my daughter as much as I can. And I find that when I learn how to be more patient, usually it has something to do with self-compassion. Like I'm gentler with myself, and so I'm gentler with her. And then I end up being gentler with the person on the phone from Kaiser, and I'm gentler with my parents, and I'm gentler with my friends. I'm more patient with my work, and it affects everything. So when we make a change to the map, the entire territory gets affected. And this is what I mean by wholeness. And it's something that every graphic designer who operates with this software would know. This is how you make changes in digital photographs today. I could do an even sharper filter and really cut out all the high frequencies, and then I get this really blurry image. So there's this really cool way in which physics is illustrated just by photographs, by the kinds of things you can do in Photoshop. And it illustrates this sense of wholeness, where the image as a whole is being affected by these changes that you're making. This is what we call a one-to-all relationship, or an all-to-one relationship. So now I want to jump to an example of how this plays out in maybe your personal life. If you have a child, you can maybe imagine this conversation that you would have had with them. Or if you don't, you can think about your parents. So imagine there's two versions of a situation. First, child says, I'm feeling nervous about my math test. Parent says, when is it? Child says, tomorrow. The parent says with an edge in their voice, well, have you studied? You can hear it in my voice, right? The child is a little exasperated, says, yes, Mom, I studied, but my teacher just gave us the review sheet today. Now the parent says firmly, okay, well, please go get your review sheet and we'll go over it together. Child is indignant, but I'm in the middle of my spelling homework. I have to do this too. Parent says, come on, your math test is important and you've spent the whole afternoon on this other stuff. I didn't realize you had a math test. Let's get to it. Child stomps off, fine, goes to get the review sheet. So here, when did you notice the emotion come into the conversation?
I noticed it right at, well, have you studied?
Yeah, with the edge in the voice. And so that's the point at which the parent actually brings this filter, brings this sense of, I mean, I wonder what they're thinking, right? If it's me, I might be thinking, oh, my child had trouble with this other math stuff last month, and I'm worried they'll continue to have trouble next month, and that they'll struggle as an adult with math, and they'll never get a job. Like it goes all the way into the future like that. And so all of that future planning is coming into my tone of voice right at that moment and making me impatient and telling and then undermining my daughter or son's autonomy and telling them what they should do. They're already studying. It's just not what I think they should be doing. So then the child feels frustrated. So here's another example of this conversation, which takes that filter and changes the way it works. Child says, I'm feeling nervous about my math test. Parent says, when is it? Child says, tomorrow. Parent is gentle now. Is there something I can do to help? Child calmly, no, I just need to go over it again. The teacher just gave us the review sheet today, but I have to finish my spelling test first. Maybe you could help quiz me on that. Parent curiously, sure, you want me to just read you the words? Child confidently, yeah, thanks. So what's the difference?
I think perhaps how quickly the conflict is resolved with a softer approach in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a matching of energies.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's, the parent has had maybe the same emotion come up. I'm not saying that they didn't have that emotion and that whole thought process about the future, but what did they do with it? They were able to manage it in a way that didn't trigger the child to go into their filter. So a lot of what I'm seeing in this narrative and what I'm pointing to in the book is how my filter triggers another person's filter and they trigger me back. And there's this, when we trigger each other, that's a filter that's happening. It's a set of thoughts or emotions that are coming up in response to what's happening around us. And when we get into these locked back and forths, we get stuck in that emotion. And here the parent was able to basically say, with their actions, they were able to say, I support you and I trust you. I'm going to help you do what you think you need to do so that you can figure out how to navigate this test to the best of your ability. Now, I'm not saying that this is the right way to parent. I'm saying that what's important here is noticing your filter. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, I'm seeing an interesting comment here that Lorna is saying that the parent is curious rather than bossy. So then, would you say that the curiosity is more of can it be equated to support in this situation?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would think. Yeah. And by being curious, what does that action demonstrate? The parent can be feeling whatever they feel in their filters, but they're not, Lorna says, not hierarchical, right? So they're putting themselves, I think that action strengthens the child's autonomy. It just gives them a sense that they're in charge. It doesn't take away the charge. It doesn't say, well, I know what's important more than you. And I think that's what the child is reacting to the first time, the parent seeming to know better. And so the parent is realizing their filter is triggering this in the kid.
Yeah, and Chris and Brooke are picking up on too about different learning styles. Chris is saying that asking questions is an approach oriented to coaching, and Brooke is picking up that it's more about how people listen and how people react to what you're saying. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Those are
being
both
s-
really astute. And again, it's not the idea that this is the right way to parent, but that it illustrates, as Brooke said, how people listen and what we're hearing. We're becoming more aware of what we're hearing, through our filters when someone speaks to us, and what other people might be hearing from us when we speak to them. So thank you everybody for your comments there. So we can go into, oh, I did want to do a reading that I missed. Let me do that. Before we go to the exercise. So I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Let's do the exercise first, and then we'll do this reading to close. So we're going to do an exercise I call naming the filter. And the reason we want to name our filters is so we can identify them, first of all, when they happen, and they can help us see what other choices we have. When we're stuck in a filter, we're reacting to some stimulus, something somebody said. By naming it and saying, oh, that's familiar to me, it helps us move out of it or see what else we can do. So the first question I have for you is, when have you felt stuck in a mindset? Stuck in a fearful place or stuck in insecurity? Have you recently felt stuck in stress? Have you felt stuck in overwhelm? Stuck in anxiety? Think of a particular time when this has happened. Bring it to mind. And ask yourself, is this a familiar feeling? Has it happened before? Probably it has. Picture what's in common here. What's the common element? And when you go into that mindset, what are you thinking about? What are the thoughts? And just to clarify what I mean by stuck in a mindset, just having a certain frame of mind. Like we started off asking, what is a feeling you want to have more of and a feeling you want to have less of? So if you've got a feeling you want to feel less of, like anxiety or overwhelm, just identify a time when you felt that and you've sort of been in that. And I say stuck in it. Maybe you don't feel stuck, but you definitely are in that space and you would like to have a different experience. And what are you thinking about and what are you feeling? What emotions are you feeling? I'll give you an example. Maybe I'm in a situation where I feel like someone's telling me what to do, and I already know a lot of the information. So I'm at work and somebody's giving me information I already know, and I feel um, insecure that I need to let them know that I already know this information because they might feel like I'm not doing my job. So what I'm thinking is I might get fired if I don't show that I already understand this. What I might be feeling is embarrassment or anger. And then finally, what physical sensations do you have? What does it feel like in your body? This filter, this mindset. Maybe you have a tense throat. Maybe you have a headache or butterflies in your stomach.
I'm seeing. I'm stuck in a mindset. I do lots of repetitive thinking, nothing fresh and new, and it feels compulsive and not a free choice.
Wonderful. Yeah, great comment. Anxiety, I see in there. Feel anxious usually. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Not wonderful, but thank you for sharing. And good to identify these. So now I want you to think about how you would name this filter. So for me, my filter might be, I have to show what I know. That's even a good one because it rhymes. I want to be a little bit silly or clever here to name it something I'll remember. I have to show what I know. And this filter is the thinking, the feeling, and the physical sensations that all go together that give you this experience.
Having to be in control and know what's happening.
Good one. Yeah, I can identify with that. So name your filter. And if you have difficulty naming them, it would be a good time to put them in the chat and describe them. And if you would like help coming up with a name. The idea of the naming is the following. It helps you see other choices that you have. So, let's come back to that in a minute. It helps you see other choices that you have. So if I have this filter that I call, I have to show what I know, then I get to say to myself, oh, well, what would it mean to not prove to this person that I know what I'm talking about? What would free up in me if I could do it differently? What would it look like to either be confident in what I know without having to say it, or to be confident and to say it, but to not be defensive? It gives me other options once I've named it, because I've identified it, and I can sort of step outside of it instead of being controlled by that filter. Has anybody come up with a name for their filter that they'd like to share?
I simply like to call mine the body yes and the body no.
What does that mean for you, Heather?
Um, well, it's kind of like it's like that gut reaction, that gut feeling of this is the correct thing to do. It kind of comes, I'll turn my video. It kind of comes from like the heart center, you know, where it's it's really tapping into those physical sensations of, oh my gosh, you know, you literally have a gut feeling about, and your stomach hurts, you
Mhm.
know, uh, and you know that's the body no
Body no,
when
body
you
yes.
want to
Gotcha.
have that reaction to it. Yeah. And then the body
Right.
yes is like that opening.
Right.
Um, of knowing that that's the right decision or that's the right approach to, whatever is going to take you down that good path. Yeah.
So this next suggestion is, when you notice the filter this week, ask yourself, what just happened? And so when you're experiencing the body no, you can tell in your body that you're experiencing that, and then you get to say, okay, what just happened? Did somebody just say something to me that triggered me feeling bad about myself or bad about them, or did I get some information? Looking where we are and what we're doing when these filters happen, and the thoughts and the feelings and the physical sensations, all of those things are clues. I see some comments.
And Nancy's got a good one here. The filter feels like everyone has to approve of me or I'm worthless.
Mhm.
If I let that go, I have a lot more freedom and a sense of living in the moment.
Yeah, I understand that one. What would you name it, Nancy? Everyone has to approve?
Uh, I have a hard time making that a smaller sentence, but that
Mhm.
I can just feel that the power, my own power, is outside of me. It's
Mhm.
like everybody else has the power, and to pull that back in is to say, I'm owning that I'm me, take it
Yeah,
or leave it, sort of. It's like it's just a lot more freedom in it. It's a lot more sense of um, I'm not as vigilant about how I'm being received.
yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe
So,
it's kind of a vigilance.
okay, so the vigilance filter.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And what's important about the word is just that it reminds you of everything you already just figured
Yes.
out.
Yes. Exactly.
Great. And so when you think about the vigilance filter, what does that tell you about what other options you have to be not vigilant or less vigilant?
Um, well, right at the moment, it feels very simple to let that go. I mean, of course, I'm not exactly in it,
Right. Right.
but um, but I just can really see that there's so much more openness and freedom and a sense of letting everybody else do what they're doing. you
Hmm.
know I mean, in a way, expecting everyone to approve of me is really putting a heavy burden out there.
Hmm. That heavy burden is you constantly having to pay attention to it, right?
Well, it's a heavy burden on them too,
Hmm.
on
Okay,
everybody
right.
else too. It can't feel very good. Right?
Right.
So I mean, I'm just aware of it right now.
So this name vigilance, see if it clues you into what else you have. What would it look like to not be vigilant? That's the way you want to use that
um,
name.
I would be unfearful.
Hmm.
Vigilance to me says fear.
Hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so see this week, if you recognize this vigilance filter again, keep thinking, let it clue you into what else could I do here? What could be different?
Right. Right.
And Lorna says, am I okay? I think that she's naming her filter. And she was talking about having to be in control and know what's happening, a distancing filter or separation.
Mhm.
I like that name. Am I okay? I can sort of very quickly understand what that filter is telling me. And then what other options does it give you, Lorna?
Yeah, am I meant to answer now?
You can, yeah.
Yeah, well, I can see, I remember you said, I think initially in the promo stuff that you were going to talk about flow, and I can see how being aware of the filters and removing them to the best of your ability in the moment will allow for flow.
Yeah. Yeah. So my experience of fear is it is a filter. We have lots of filters, right? We have joy, we have sadness, we have anger, we have frustration. All these things are different ways that we perceive ourselves and we filter our information through us. So when I'm angry, somebody might say something to me and it affects me a certain way because I'm in that filter of anger. And if I'm joyful, I react differently. That's all part of flow. Where I stop flow is when I am fearful, because fear is this sort of different type of filter which just stops us from moving at all.
Mhm.
So my view of flow is when we're able to move between the filters and be different people at different times according to what feels natural to us. And when we're stuck in a particular filter, it may be because we're afraid of something. Something is keeping us there, whether it's a trauma or a thought of something bad that could happen that we've had happen before. And so the more we can recognize which filter we're in and identify if there's something we're afraid of that's keeping us in that filter, then we can get back into flow.
And I have the sense that filters are all about the past, not about the present. Is that your sense of it as well?
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Conditioning, basically. And
Yeah.
I say, I think traumatic events that
Yeah.
we make certain decisions about how to protect ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Filter is a set of thoughts that we've habitually conditioned ourselves to experience, like you said. And so we bring that set of filters to the table in a new situation, but it colors the whole situation with that filter.
Yeah.
And so then it can be hard to see synchronicities, right? Because if I'm stuck in a mindset that this person is out to get me, then they offer me a ride or they offer me help with a project or something, I'm going to assume that they're going to undermine me in some way, you know, and that's going to get me out of flow, because that might be exactly where I need to go to get to my next step.
Also, it won't bring out the best in them, will it? You're kind of superimposing some kind of doubt and wondering and
Right.
no.
Right. And that brings us back to the conversation with the parent and child, where one person's filter is sensed by the other person. I mean, we sense each other's filters. And with our loved ones, we take the time to work those through and to really ask questions. What are you really saying? What are you really feeling right now? But with people we don't trust as much, we don't really do that as much. And so we build up patterns of communication that may not be all that healthy, or we may trigger each other and never take the time to work it through.
Mhm.
So one more thing I'll say about flow is very important, I think, to not just think about flow as optimizing your state of mind or something like that, but it's where life is leading us next. And sometimes that involves experiencing grief or sadness, because that grief or sadness is part of healing. And that's part of the title of my book, is how the world is programmed to help us grow, heal, and adapt. And I think this programming is what I would call synchronicity, right? Synchronicities are these events that happen in particular to help us grow and heal and adapt, to learn about ourselves. And when we are faced with grief, that can be a very important part of the process of healing our past filters. And healing, in my view, is really just the peeling back of the filters. It's identifying what filter we have, experiencing new experiences that aren't as traumatic or painful, that allow us to let it go, and then not having that view anymore. And when we don't have that view anymore, we might not be triggering that same set of circumstances again and again in our life. So when we've healed something, we're not going to necessarily have it come up as much. When we haven't healed something, my experience is synchronicities will show up in my life to bring that situation back again and again. So if I'm feeling like I need to please everybody all the time, I'm going to synchronistically probably experience situations where I'm in that situation and I do feel like I need to please people. And the opportunity there is to use each of those circumstances. Every time synchronicity puts me in a situation where I am faced with a real deep desire to please everybody, I get to practice changing that filter again and again. Yeah. So thank you, Lorna, for bringing up that question about flow. And you can use these 3 words this week when you think about your filter. Name the filter, and then notice when it comes up. And then nurture whichever filter you want to experience more of. Take the time to nurture them. Lots of lessons in the Earth School. So we have time for a few questions, and I'll put a list here of the different ways you can get in touch. You can find Point Reyes books online if you want to buy the book from them, or other bookstores around you, wherever you are. You can also get it online. And I've got a workshop that I'm leading on May 2nd, which goes in more depth into these concepts and these ideas and these exercises. And you may be familiar with the Living in Flow video course. And then a paper I referenced came out that is in quantum reports. So that's all on my Synchronicity Institute website. Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions or discussion that you'd like to bring up? Comments? And if you'd like to join my email list, that's on the synchronicityinstitute.com website. Questions or comments?
I had a couple questions.
Yeah, jump in.
All right. Of course, everything is all in my notes here. So you're talking about filtering the choices down, right? And if it's safe to assume that filtering those choices down is our job to do every day, then is it safe to assume then that choice point is constant and not just the big, major life events?
Yeah. Is this Heather, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Got a venue change.
Yeah. That's the beauty of this work, is that it's not, synchronicities are what people think of as like these very unusual events, this connection where you bump into somebody at the grocery store and you've been meaning to talk to them. So that's one way to look at the bigger synchronicities. But what I really get to in this book is really just a law of repetitive experiences, the meaningfulness of our experiences that allows us to see each experience as part of a growing curve for us. And if we can't see right away how this experience is helping us grow, then synchronicities are events that don't make sense in the moment, but start to make sense later. When you have another conversation with somebody else, and you start to see that what's happening to you is really in line with what you're trying to learn right now. Maybe somebody's taken advantage of you, and in the moment, it just feels terrible. But after having a few days or weeks of other experiences and conversations, you see how, oh yeah, this really relates to how I've been treated at work a lot, or in my family a lot over the years. And for me, these patterns come from, when I was younger and choices I made. We all make choices in order to cope with our environment when we're younger. And I think the healing process is a constant process of seeing that in new light, and then having an adult ability to choose a different filter or a different response. Yeah, it's a great question, Heather. Does anybody else want to jump in and unmute and ask a question?
Is there some courage involved? Lorna asks.
Oh, they can't unmute.
Oh, well,
That's my fault. Let's see.
Chris and Lorna will unmute you.
Hey, hi. Hi, Sky.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I guess my question is about, I'm trying to understand how the wholeness, it's related with what we talked today about the filter. I mean, I feel like it depends what we mean of wholeness. And I feel like you can think about all your life, all the existence of the universe. And as I understand it, you're saying that there could be an experience that pretty much is going to extend in all the life of the universe, depending what you're doing or how you react to that, at least from your subjective point of view. Do you understand correctly? I'm trying to make sense out of it, of the wholeness part with the part that we talk about later about the filtering.
Yeah. So the wholeness shows up in different ways in different examples, and it's sort of a little hard to pin down. In all of these examples, the way I see the relationship between filters and wholeness is that a filter is a perspective that we're taking on something, but that there's a hidden hole to that thing that we can't see. So when I get to know you, I know certain things about you. I have a certain set of a window into who you are, but there's a hidden hole, a hidden person that I don't know. And even to ourselves, even to me, there's a hidden hole that I don't know. And so filters also apply to how I understand myself and the different views I have on myself. But we can't ever actually experience the wholeness except through these individual points of view and filters or perspectives. So in the case of the physics of the multiverse, which is this really huge example of wholeness, the wave function of a quantum system evolves into all these branches. If you've pictured like the branching tree that I've showed you in the past, has all these different branches of possibility, like a decision tree of all the things you could choose. Well, all of those branches form a wholeness. And that comes back to this question, how do we make something out of everything? We're not actually starting with a void or a vacuum. We're starting with all these branches of possibility. And when we make a measurement of the world, when we interact with people, we're experiencing one branch and we're getting something out of everything. We start with everything or all of these things, and we end up with one real experience. So this is about how we get an actual life, an actual finite set of circumstances. We become a doctor or a teacher or a plumber or whatever we become out of all the things we could have been when we were younger. That's how do we get something from everything. That shift in mindset. So that's what I can sort of offer in terms of wholeness here, and maybe there'll be more that comes from further conversation. Does that help? I think it's a deep topic, and that's why, of course, the whole book is really about this concept of wholeness. Thank you for asking, Chris. Somebody else was jumping in. Who was it?
I just was curious why you chose the word leap rather than step or flow or glide or whatever choice. You had a million choices, right? And that's why I asked about courage, because it's like a leap of faith kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, for me, a year ago, I was experiencing a lot of awareness of filters, like patterns, but I wasn't through them. I was experiencing them, and I saw that there was a sense in which you can understand more and more and more about your filters, but at some point you just have to be different. It's once you learn all about the filters that you're acting from, you still do them. And the not doing them involves like a disconnect from the old self. And so it's this sense of, even once I figure it all out and, why am I doing this pattern? Why am I constantly undermining my own self-esteem or something like that? At some point, I still have to like speak up in the conversation where I would have been quiet. And that's a leap. It's a courageous leap. Yeah. It takes a discontinuous jump to a whole different way of being.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that you asked that, because I sort of write what I'm writing thinking about where I want to be. And so I wanted to make that leap to wholeness. And I knew that I in many ways I hadn't. And I hoped that by writing this book, I would. So.
And did you?
In some ways I have, and I keep using it as a milestone, as a marker.
It's a journey, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Lana.
Chris says yes, that the discussion helped, and Lisa has her hand raised.
Oh, great.
I was wondering if visualization was part of getting there, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you see it in your mind, does it actually, I've noticed that can get me to where I want to go. Is that part of what you were saying also?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And there's so many tools that can be useful. Visualization, I would offer an extra tool of the emotional visualization. What does it feel like? We can visualize in our minds, and that's really useful. And also, what does it feel like to be different? That's kind of what Lorna was saying about the leap. To make a leap, like I might visualize feeling abundant or being abundant, or visualize being confident. But then what does that feel like? Can I actually bring that feeling into my chest? And if I can feel that, then I start to, the embodiment, my first book, I talked about this thing called anticipated qualitative experience. I'm anticipating the experience by having the experience. So I'm visualizing what it feels like to be confident, and then I create synchronicities in my life which allow me the chance to be confident. So I think visualization is very useful, and I think we can visualize also with our bodies in a way. Do you know what I mean, Lisa?
I do. Like being like a player feels like they're in the zone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who does sports, for example, if they can feel it, see it, and feel it, it becomes.
Yeah, and the flow is about this synergy between the mind and the body and the heart, the feelings, the felt sense of the body and the mind thinking.
When are you going to do this book in audio?
It's coming out over the summer. Yeah,
Thank you.
they're making
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get it then.
it. Great, wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining, Lisa. And just so anybody who hasn't signed up for my email list and would like to, I'm going to put it in the chat again. Any other questions? Anybody who can't unmute, I'm happy to try and make that happen for you. Nancy says, appreciating the simplicity of this. That's great. I'm really happy that you think that.
Oh, Lorna said a thank you and a goodbye.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining. And it sounds like we're out of questions. So go read the book. Amy has a question.
Maybe he has questions. Oh, let me unmute you, Amy.
Thank you, Sky. I really
Thank you, Amy.
appreciate it. I really
Yeah.
am happy that I joined tonight. Thank
Great.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining, everybody. And thank you, Heather, for moderating and helping me out and asking questions and helping everybody else out.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Katie.
Thank you.
And
Very
I
wonderful.
big shout out to Katie for the filming location where we saw this. We made this great video that you can see on my website.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie.
think.
Wonderful work, Sky. Thank you.
You're
Sure.
welcome. Thank you, Nancy. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody who joined.